So I want to talk about how I made money my idol and the process that God has been walking me through over the last couple of years to break that off. And I think I want to note that if you are a man or a woman who is tired of having it all, looking like you have it all together, um, telling people that you're fine, tired of being the strong one, um, tired of always having to figure things out on your own, there is a high chance that this video is for you, right? I remember one of my earliest memories around money was, I wouldn't say my earliest because this is more, when I think about it, it's more like in my teens, was my mom meeting my potential boyfriend, and she said to him, "You do not have to worry with Shaniel because she is a save. She's always saving, and so forth." And I remember thinking with pride, that was a really good thing, right? Because we grew up traditionally with the idea of, we save, we invest, we do all of the things related to money, because that is what stewardship looks like. And I'm not here to bash against saving and investing and all of that stuff. But when we're doing it for the wrong reasons, it makes money an idol for us, right? And so, for years, I was one that everybody I hoarded my money. I was always saving, and the reason why I was always saving was because money represented security for me, right? Not only that, I trusted heavily in my ability to hold me up, right? And one of the ways that I was able to hold me up and depend on myself was by making a lot of money. And so I would sit in jobs that I would accept less than what I was actually worth. And I use the word worth in quotes because I don't really believe that anybody can pay you what you're worth. But because at least it was some level of security. I was somebody like I could not be trusted to share, to actually say what God had said, if there was a possibility that it would affect my money, right? And I mean, there was also the point where, because alongside being the strong one, I carried this fear of rejection, I carried this fear of abandonment, and I carried this fear of being judged. I would give of my money in places that I shouldn't have given to ensure that nobody would be disappointed with me, etc. Right? Or the people that I cared about. It wasn't like I was giving it left, right, and center, but it was just, there's that, right? Even on top of that, because of this hoarding and spending, I would never give myself the things that I desire, not unless I could see where it was excess money, etc. Right? Like, I remember wanting panties and a shoe or a dress, and not being willing to like spend that money on myself. I had it. It was just that it would have depleted the security I was building. It would have depleted the savings that I was setting up. And I couldn't afford that, and so I would literally wait until like I had a bonus from work to buy something like that. Right? And so that was how I lived for years. It's one of the reasons why I burnt out twice in corporate. it's a part of the reason why I burnt out twice in corporate. Um, it Man, having money as an adult, money is a bad master, alright? But that was how I lived for years until around, I remember 2021, after my second burnout, after I realized I was burnt out again, I was so upset and I went to the Lord and I was like, God, apparently I don't know what to do to not be burnt out, because here I am burnt out again for the second time since 2017. And I asked him what to do and he said to me, leave. And I was like, Sally said what? Nope, because that's gonna mess with my money. And I do not feel I am secured, financially secure enough to take such a leap. Like, I mean, even professionals will tell you that, hey, unless you have 6 months of savings, like you can carry the boat for 6 months. Do not leave your job, right? Do not walk away from your job. And for me, I only had 3 months of savings, right? But I knew the Lord was saying to me, and so I decided I left, right? I left, and the thing that was even harder for me is that he told me when I was leaving, do not accept any job offers that was coming your way. It was really strange because one, I was making good money by Jamaican standards in my job. Two, I was job hunting at the time for like about almost a year, and I could not, like, I only got like 2 interviews during that time, even though my peers would tell you that I was one of the best at my job. And the minute I decided to leave, doors started to open. I think I had like I got about like 3 job offers, one behind the other. Like, oh, people calling me up, I hear that you're leaving. Would you want to come and work with us? And the Lord said to me, do not accept it. Even my boss said, just take a couple weeks off, take the time you need, and then come back. And the Lord said to me, say no. And so I left corporate with only 3 months of savings. For a while I was a virtual assistant, but this is not even about my career things. It's really about money and as an idol for me. But that was where God started to do a work within me, because I told the Lord, you have 3 months, because I only have 3 months of savings, right? And I mean, he provided. I had clients coming in from my consulting business, and from my virtual assistant business, etc. And so I still carry that sense of, I can depend on myself. I had some savings, some investments and some savings and all of that stuff. So, I mean, even if I was not making money or things were slow, I still had a sense of security because I had my financial net. I think we call it our financial net, right? And so that I still had money as my idol. I still have money as my idol, even though I said, Lord, I trust you. And fast forward to March of 2024, the Lord started to talk to me specifically about 2 things. I remember there were some changes he was making in my life where he was telling me that there are persons I have been giving money to that I was no longer supposed to be giving money to. Like, I was reducing, like I was providing for them in a particular way, and the Lord was like, nope, it's time for you to stop doing that. And so I was in the process of unraveling that, and then the Lord asked me 2 things. He said to me, are you the parent or are you the child? And for me, what that meant is he was asking me, am I playing the role that he is meant to play in my life, right? Where he's my parent, he is my father, and I am supposed to be the child who relies on her heavenly father. And yet here I was, because feeling like I was the only one I could trust, I was the only one I can depend on, etc. I had taken on the parent role in my life, right? And the second thing that he pointed out to me, he said to me, "You are a provision I have made to them, not their provider." And this was in relation to, I was feeling a lot of guilt and angst about, changing how I was showing up and relating to these persons, changing how the provisions that I would make for this person, right? And the Lord said to me, "Let me know that I am not their provider, right? I am a provision that He has made for them, and so I should know that He is not going to stop providing for them just because He has told me that I should now step out of that role of as of provision with them, right?" And He was also showing me in many and I mean, I think these are two lessons I've spent the last couple since then learning, like what it means when God says He is my parent, and I am the child, and what it means when God says He is provider and I'm a provision that He has made for others, right? And I think this is something that we all like, especially when the conversation around money being an idol for us. That's very important for us to learn, because a lot of this is around trust and understanding the role that you play in a relationship, the role that God designed you to play in a relationship. And so shortly after He asked me those two questions, He said to me, He wants me to release all my recurring clients in my consulting business. And that was very hard for me. That was extremely hard, because I'm like, "God, now you're messing with my money coming in." And so I delayed and delayed on it, and then eventually I got started on it. And I remember, so He gave me that instruction the May of 2024. And I remember by the August of 2024, I only had one client left that I needed to release. And I kept telling myself that I would release that client when I came back from vacation I went off on vacation late August, I think. I just couldn't work up the courage, because I felt like I was letting down that client. I felt like I was at least run it through the end of August, so that the bill that the client would have owed me, the invoice that the client would have owed me at the end of August, could come through, and I could have the money from that, etc. Right? And I remember the Lord again used that provider versus provision concept for me, where He spoke to me about this client and let me know that, and this is something for people pleasers, that a lot of times we stand in places that God has told us to leave, or to say no to, or to walk away from, because we feel guilty. We feel like we're letting somebody down. We feel like somebody's going to be disappointed in us, etc. Not realizing that because we are standing in that place, we are actually blocking someone else from stepping into that place that is designed to actually help that person during that season. Or we're not willing to face the reason why we fear leaving, which for me in this case was also affected, my finances are being affected, right? And so I remember coming back from vacation, and a couple of things, like the client and I had a conversation that my client initiated. And I mean, it was a conversation that I look on it, I'm like, "God, if I had obeyed you when you said this conversation would not have even been needed. You were trying to protect me from this, but because of my own fears, I delayed, right?" And so that last client relationship and I ended, and it became a thing now, like, all right, God, it became a thing like, all right, I no longer have recurring clients, so I must increase the one-off clients that I have coming in. And so I dove. I started, doing more marketing. I started doing more, pushing for more sales conversations, all of that in my consulting business. Like, okay, if God has told me release my recurring clients, at least I can still have one-off clients. And I remember, about the October of 2024, the Lord said to me, that He was closing the door around my ability to make money in my business. And that one shook me up. And even though it shook me up, I still pushed to see, maybe I can still make something happen. Maybe He'll change His mind, etc. And I remember the week I realized He was dead serious was when I had like 3 prospective clients come in. We had great conversations, and a part of having those great conversations is they decided that they wanted to work with me, and so forth. And this was probably almost $100,000 in prospects. And the only thing that was needed to be done was for them to make the payments. And within a week of God saying what He said to me, one by one, these persons started having difficulties. And they decided, we're going to have to pause on this. We can't proceed. And that was when I realized God was really serious. And I remember when I realized God was really serious, I became freaking anxious. My anxiety went out the roof. I started to hold on tighter to the little I had. I started to try to strong arm God into doing things a particular way, because you know what? On top of this, I had just moved from my home country, Jamaica, to St. Kitts and Nevis. And aside on moving that, the only persons I knew there was my friend and her family. I'd moved there because God had told me to move there. And so now I had no money coming in. I had to be paying rent in US dollars, not Jamaican dollars. And I could see the money dwindling fast. And I remember there was a time when my rent was about to be due, and I'll tell you what trying to blackmail God looks like. My rent was about to be due, and I remember I heard the Lord say to me to transfer some money from my Jamaican dollar account to the USD account that the rent was going to be paid from. And I was insistent that I would not do that, because it would have meant that my first backup would have now been down to 0, right? And so what I did was I would put on God. I would say, God, I know you're going to come through, because you'll never leave nor forsake me, and I'm your daughter, etc. And I would say all of those things. And not even on top of that, I will put on the gospel music around, how I know God will come through, and, how faithful He is, etc. And I remember when God pointed it out to me, that I remember the day the rent became due and no extra money came in. So we can't strong arm God. And a wave of disappointment rushed over me. And in that disappointment with the Lord, I withdrew. I didn't want to spend any time with Him anymore. I didn't want to talk to Him. I didn't want to hear from Him or anything along the lines of that. And I remember He said to me, that was when He pointed out that I was being disobedient to what He had said. And at the same time, I was using gospel music and praise and all of that as a way to think that I could strong arm Him into doing what I wanted him to do. Right? I don't know how many you can you relate to doing that, because yes, I did that. Right? Another memory I remember from that season of life is I remember my credit card bill being due. And it wasn't a lot, to be honest. But I had some money sitting down in another USD account. And I remember the Lord said to me that I should send the money from, and it wasn't even a lot. Because it wasn't even a lot. I think it was like, if I remember correctly, it was like 600 US dollars. It wasn't a lot of money. But the Lord told me to send the money from another USD account to my Jamaican dollar account to pay for that credit card balance. And I wrestled with it, right? I remember even around that time, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, a new friend of mine, and she was sharing how, when the Lord was dealing with her around money, and so forth, there was a time in her life when she had an amount. Like, once she had that amount in her, like when she hit a certain level in her bank account, once her bank account fell to a certain level, that's when the anxiety would rack up. That's when she would go into hustle mode. That's when she would try to do everything to get beyond that number, right? And I remember when she said it, I realized, oh, my number is anything $600 and under, right? And so when God told me to spend the money in that USD account, it was a wrestle for me. But I remember having a conversation with my friend, and I decided, you know what, God, I know what you're telling me. Let me go obey you and do that. And so within the span of like 2 weeks, I was down to backup, 2 savings backup, right? I remember fast forwarding to like December of 2024. The Lord told me I needed to take a trip, and I didn't have the finances to do it, and He told me to put it on my credit card. Yes, I know this is blasphemous for some people, because I was never the one to owe credit card debt. Never. I used my credit card like a debit card since I've had a credit card, because I was so afraid of getting in debt. I'd heard the stories, and I did not want to owe anyone anything. Like, I didn't owe rent, I didn't owe credit card, I didn't owe anything on the credit card. I didn't buy anything I couldn't pay off immediately. I would buy my furniture cash, etc., because my way of being was that I can only trust in myself. It was around building financial security, and a part for building financial security for me was ensuring that I didn't owe anybody, and so forth, right? And so when God told me to put the trip on the credit card, it took me like 2 weeks to obey to do that, right? Of course, the ticket got more expensive and all that stuff. But I remember realizing like I needed to go do this trip, and I'm like, God, I don't have the money to book an Airbnb or stay with, I don't have that money. And He worked it out so that I had friends I could stay with. I had a friend I could stay with for the first part of the trip, and my boyfriend at the time spoke to his best friend's mom, and she agreed to host me at her house for like 6 weeks. And so God provided. But I remember now, fast forward to 2025, because remember we're talking about God breaking the stronghold around the stronghold that money had on me. I remember getting to March of 2025, and the Lord said to me it was time to cash out my investments. And that was hard, because I had investments that I had been building up since probably like 2017. I had Google stock, I had Amazon stock. I think Google had just done a stock split. I think Amazon had done one too, if I remember correctly. And they were just starting to rise again, and I was excited about it because I was just like, I'm in this for the long haul. And so when God told me it was time to cash out my investments, I was like, hell to the no, I'm not doing it. But we're talking about God dismantling my backups one by one, because He was in dismantling my backups. It wasn't that He was being cruel. He was teaching me what it means to say He is my parent. He was teaching me what it means for Him to be my provider, where I am not my provider, right? I am not the parent. And the truth is, I was exhausted from walking in that role. Like, I was really, really exhausted. Like, I was tired. And so I was, on one hand, I was telling God, you know what, I'm tired of being the strong one. On another hand, I was telling God, you know, I'm just tired of having to figure it out all on my own. And what the Lord was doing was giving me opportunities to dismantle the things that I had stood on to rely on myself for years. And this was one of them, money as my idol, right? And so what He did was, around the time when He told me it was time to cash up my investments, He put me in a situation where it was time for me to go back to St. Kitts to go pack up my luggage and all of that stuff, like pack up my house, etc., because I'd gotten married by that point. And you know, I was looking to go to the States to spend, like, while my husband and I sorted things out to do that, right? And so that was how I decided to take the leap and cash out the investment so that I could pay for the ticket and get the stuff sorted out, etc. And then fast forward to about May of 2025. So March came, cash out the investments, etc. May of 2025. At this point, I still had credit card debt, and it was weighing the hell on me because I had never had credit card debt before. And there is stuff happening financially with my husband and I, and we owed rent, and it was brutal for me. I'm not gonna lie, it was very, very brutal for me. I was like, God, I have never been here before. I have done my best to not owe any man. I had done my best to provide for myself. I had done my best to never be in a situation like that. And yet here we are owing rent. And I remember, like, so many times crying and breaking down. And it was an interesting season because this was a season where God kept telling me, trust him, and He's got us. My husband and I were even doing a 40-day Bible study around that time, and a lot of the scriptures was about God's nature, and He would be telling me, trust Him, etc. And all I could think of was that, God, where were you when I was a kid, etc. And in fact, one morning I broke down crying because I'm like, God, I read this, but I don't have any experience with that, right? Where were you when I was the teenager and the young adult who had to figure out how to go to college? Where were you when I was the teenager going to high school, and I had to, my mom was, we were poor, and we didn't have money, and so I had to, my mom would send us to school and ask the teacher to give us lunch, and I got tired of that, so I drink water instead. Like, God, where were you? And I remember one that morning, the Lord told me to go listen to a song that a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, had sent to me like a couple of days before. And it was a song that I had heard a lot when I was in college. And I remember as I listened to that song, my mind flashed back to every single time that I had a couple of the times when I've heard that song, because it wasn't every single time, right? And it was like, as my mind was doing that flashback, the Lord started to speak to me about how He was there with me all along. Like the people He sent my way to lift my hands up, the people who was there to cheer me on, the fact that He provided a partial scholarship for me, the fact that, when I would be going home weary and that song would come on and it would be like a source of encouragement for me, etc., and all of that stuff. Like, He just started to show me Himself in all of this. And I remember He raised for me the story of the prodigal son, and it was the first time I was here. I was like, I've never heard the concept, the story taught this way before. Maybe I have and I don't remember, but it was like something fresh for me, because He talked about how the prodigal son made the choice to take his inheritance and leave. And in, like, I don't know any parent who would not feel disrespected if their children came to them and said, "Daddy, I know you're not dead yet, but give me what I would get if you were dead. Give me my inheritance." I mean, there are lots of parents, I guess, who would probably never, that son would probably never see a dime. And yet, the father gave the son his inheritance. And the Lord said to me, "Shanielle, you made the choice to walk a particular way. It wasn't that it was my goal or my intent for you to walk that way. You made the choice. And yet still within the limits of your choice, I made provision for you." Right? And I mean, it broke me so badly. Right? It broke me so badly. Like, I cried so bitterly with a heart of repentance, because I'm like, God, I have wronged you over the years, thinking that you weren't there when you were there, right? Blaming you for the choices that I had made, and so forth, right? There's a passage of scripture in Job that talks about how Job breaks down crying, and he talks about how he has seen himself, like he has seen God and he has seen himself, and he abhors himself. And I can relate so heavily with that, because in that moment I was just like, God, man, I wronged you badly. Right? And I remember shortly after that, even in that same month when we owed rent, I remember the Lord had said to Jeremy, my husband, that, "Hey, tell me how much you need. Like, calculate your expenses, know the amount, and that's the amount that you're praying for." And I think we had the amount, and we're believing the Lord for it. And I remember shortly after that, we had a situation happen where, so shortly after the whole crying and seeing myself and being like, God, man, I wrong you and all of that stuff, it's kind of like seeing that He's trustworthy, I remember my husband got a call from someone, no, we got a text message, and my husband called the person. And in calling the person, he, I can't actually say what the person is. Got a text from my mother-in-law, called my mother-in-law, and in speaking to my mother-in-law, he ended up speaking to my father-in-law. And he shared how my father-in-law was asking him how is he doing, etc., and he eventually shared that we're believing the Lord for this amount, and we have like 2 days to, we had like a day, and I mean we were doing a whole lot, like we were marketing heavily in business, we were doing a lot of outreach, etc., 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 and we had like the final deadline for the rent, the extension was like 2 days away. And I remember my husband, in relaying the story, told me that his dad said to him, if he does not hear from him by, I think it was like 11 a.m. the following morning, which was a Monday, he was gonna send him some money. And it stuck with me. It stuck with me so hard. Like, wow, what kind of parent would be like, my kid is in trouble, I don't care how he got there, I'm not here to chastise him, and I know the kid said he has a plan and he's working it, but if he does not hear from the kid, if he doesn't care, he's gonna do something to help the kid. It stuck with me. And I remember that early Monday morning, I woke and the Lord told me to go get my husband, because my husband was upstairs. He had gone upstairs for some stuff, and we settled back down, and I realized I couldn't sleep. And as I'm lying there, my mind started to go back to my childhood. And I had these memories of my mom telling me how my father, how she met my father a couple of days before she went into the hospital to give birth to my youngest brother, and how she asked my father to bring us some food, and my father took 2 weeks to do it. And I had some memories of my mother and all of that, and I started to cry. I started to think about my father-in-law and what my father-in-law did with my husband with us, and I started to cry. And it wasn't even that my father-in-law didn't even send us money yet. It was just, it hit me so deep. Like, I started to cry because I'm like, I've never had my father did not do that at all with us. And I mean, I broke because I'm like, God, I was just a kid. Like, I shouldn't have had to have had that experience. I shouldn't have had to take on the weight of being the one who feels like she has to provide for herself, or that she can't rely on persons, or all of that stuff, or have to be the strong one, or have to figure out how to be secure. Like I shouldn't have had to, and the Lord said to me, this is why He has allowed us to get where we were with the rent, and all of that stuff, because He wanted to give me that experience. He wanted me to understand that when He says, I am your Heavenly Father, when He says, I am parent, this is what He means. Like, He's not going to leave His kid in trouble, right? And I remember as I was, I cried so hard. And the next day, my father-in-law reached out to my husband to say, hey, he just sent us some money, and it was like 4 times what we were praying for, 4 times what we were believing the Lord for. And I tell you, it broke me. Like, that experience transformed me, because I now had a model of a father Here, scripture talks about, if earthly fathers know how to give good gifts, how much more does your heavenly father? And what father would promise his son XYZ, or his son would ask him for a fish and he gives him a stone, something like that. But I never had that experience of what it meant to have a father. And so when God would say, I'm your father, trust me, I could not relate to that, right? And so that was one of the experiences that really got me, and so forth. And it was funny because around that same time was when God started to show me as well, that I had made money an idol. Like, if you wanted to see me get anxious, if you wanted to see me get angry, if you wanted to see me get have all the feelings and so forth, if you wanted to see me start hoarding, mess with my money, right? It was also the season as well when the Lord started to show me. I remember he told me something called buy the damn crackers. And it was a case where, because Jeremy and I, we were low on funds and so forth, and we were trying to be good stewards of all of that, of our money. We were doing Dave Ramsey's program. We started doing envelope budgeting at first, and then doing Dave Ramsey's program and so forth, because that was one of the things the Lord said to us. Like, in our marriage, it was to start Dave Ramsey's program, financial university program, right? And so we needed to learn to be good stewards of our money. Not that I wasn't a good steward before, but there was so much I needed to learn, right? Like, for example, I had mixed personal and business money in one, and that was like the 2024, the Lord had told me, like, split, it's time for me to separate the two, and all of that. And so, buy the damn crackers, that story was simply, I remember Jeremy and I made a budget to go to Walmart one day. Like, okay, these are the things that we're gonna get, this is the amount of money that's in the envelope, because we're using envelope budgeting at the time. And we went, and I remember while we were in Walmart, I realized that I had not put my favorite crackers on the list, and I was hesitant to do so because I'm like, we have a budget. And so imagine how pissed off I got when Jeremy also realized that there were some of his favorite things that were missing from the list, but he had no problem picking it up in the store. Right? And I would just watch with resentment as he does it, because I'm like, why is it that I can respect the budget but he cannot? And I remember the Lord said to me quite clearly, Shaniel, buy the damn crackers. And it was a wrestling within me, because remember, I told you close to the start of this video how I would know I want something, or I would know I need something, and I will delay getting it because from a financial perspective it did not make sense, right? And I say this not, and I want to emphasize this again. I'm not saying that we should run ourselves into debt. I am definitely not saying that we should spend unwisely, but the motive matters. The motive of why you're doing what you're doing matters. If you're doing it from a place of fear, it is not a good place, right? If you're doing it from a place of, if I spend this, I'm going to run out, it is not a good place to live in, right? If you're doing it from a place of, I need to feel secure in order to do X thing, to the point where you will disobey the Lord, it is not a good place to live in. And so at rest is crackers. And I was ready to deny myself crackers. I was ready to disobey the Lord around buying crackers, because I was looking at the money and saying, nah. Right? And that was what the Lord came for that day. And so it was kind of like, eventually we got to the car, and I told Jeremy what happened. And he said, all right, let's go buy the crackers. And we went and we got the crackers. And that day something broke off me. Right? And I mean, there are so many stories that I have within that season, but I want to fast forward a little bit more, because during that time of doing the Dave Ramsey's program, Jeremy and I were able to pay off credit card debt. A lot of credit card debt. The credit card debt from October 2024 for me, he had some credit card debt, and so forth. We were able to start having an emergency savings, and it came from a place of stewardship, not a place of fear. We were able to have buckets that we could literally, spend from, like have an OPEX bucket for the month, that we could spend from at our leisure and not worry about, if we're, if we're being bad stewards, etc., because it was what we budgeted for the month, and so forth. And then fast forward to, I think, October of 2024, shortly after we sold everything and went to Jamaica. We sold everything. The Lord told us to sell everything and to go where He tells us to go, and we went to Jamaica right after the hurricane. We were in Jamaica spending. We didn't have a lot of money, and so forth, so we were very mindful of our spending. And the Lord said to us, He showed us a pattern of behavior that we had. And the pattern of behavior that we had was, we would automatically spend from the credit card without even checking if He was telling us to spend from the credit card or to spend from the debit card or to use cash. And the Lord said to us, some trust in horses, some trust in chariots, but you trust in Capital One. Right? And it was just an invitation for us to be mindful of God. Should we be spending from here, or should we be spending from there? Because we approached the Capital One card, I'd said it before that I treated my credit card like a debit card. And so I would always spend with the intent that I would pay back at the end of the month, and that was what we're doing. And the Lord was like, yeah, that behavior needs to go, because there are times when I will want you to have cash in. There are times when I want you to use a particular method of payment, not the standard one that you go to via default. And I remember by that Jamaica trip, we were almost out of money again. And there was some money that we were expecting to come in that hadn't come in, and so forth. And of course, I was all worried and everything. And I was like, God, I have got to do something. Like, it was really funny as well. I don't think I mentioned this up in the video, but the Lord had told me that I shouldn't get a job. Like, after He closed up my finances He told me He was closing the door on my ability to make money in 2024. One of the avenues that I was like, all right, my consulting business is done, I can go get a job. I am very good at what I do. I am skilled at what I do. Like, I'm one of the best in my field. I was one of the best in my field. I can go get a job. And He said no. And every single time that we would have a situation where we need money, I would ask again, and He would be like, nope. Right? And it's an uncomfortable place to sit in, but I have slowly gotten to the place where I am more interested in obeying the Lord and not screwing up what He is using this season to do within me, and what He is using this season to prepare us for financially, right? Because God has made us some really big promises. They're like the vision that He has given for us in business, and the vision that He has given for us with our nonprofit requires that we be good steward of our money, that money not be our idol, that we not spend money out of fear, or like we not handle money from a place of fear, or we do not, our power, our influence, and our authority cannot be perverted because of our fear around money, right? I said it so many times where I think I said it before at the beginning of the video. Like, I would not speak up or act in a particular way if I even thought for a moment that that was going to mess with my money. That was where I was, right? And so he's in that process of doing that refinement. And so it was kind of like getting to December of 2025, and us being in financial difficulties, like think and I use the word difficulties very thing. It was just like, oh, we had money in our emergency fund. We But like, it was, cash was not like, we didn't have cash that we could use. And I remember thinking, God, I need to get a job. It's like, nope. And thinking that surely lightning can't strike in the same place twice, because our in-laws had God had used our in-laws the first time. There was no way he was going to use our in-laws again. And not being able to think of, Lord, how will we get money? Like where is that going to come from? Like, we need to be provided for, and so forth. And I remember we did Christmas at my in-laws, and my in-laws gave us a check for Christmas. And it wasn't something, from what I understand, it's not something abnormal that they do, but it was the Lord. I remember the Lord said, when I saw the check, the Lord said to me, Shaniel, you do not get to mandate who I use and when I use them, right? I needed you to get money from your in-laws again, the person who says he is your father again, for you to understand that this is not a one-off thing where when I say I'm your father, I'll show up here, but I won't show up there. That's not how I work, right? And so it was that continuous lesson of him teaching me what it means to be my father, right? To show I'm consistent, right? And so we get to the new year of 2026, and this is a continuing journey. I am recording this in July of 2026, but I wanted to share what happened in 2026 and then wrap up this video, knowing that at some point there will be a part 2. So we get to the January of 2026, where we're still going wherever the Lord tells us to do. So we come back from Jamaica, we were in Georgia for a bit, and then the Lord cleared the path for us to go to Florida. And it was to go to Miami, and then to go to Orlando. And I remember in Orlando, we were in Orlando, I think, for like 2 months or something. We start running low again, and the Lord said to us, use your emergency fund. And of course, I am kicking and screaming. I tell you, if you want to know where you have fear, check your anxiety levels around certain resources. Check your anxiety levels around certain people. Check what brings up your anxiety when you're in authority. Just check. Your feelings are some strong indicators. Because when God said to us, use your emergency fund, I was like, God, we just cleared off our credit cards. We have emergency fund. What are you talking about? That is bad stewardship, right? But we have learned that if God said, it doesn't matter if we disagree or not, it's all right, let's do it. We delayed a couple days, wondering, will God provide another way? And then we realized, oh yeah, he's serious. And so eventually we cleared out our emergency fund to pay the rent that month. And then shortly after that, he sent us to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And when we were leaving for Tulsa, Oklahoma, he said to us that my goal here is to run you out of money, to get you down to zero. And he was not just talking about what we had in hand, he was talking about our credit cards. Like, in fact, he told us, pay for your flights. You're taking the I think he told us book like first class. This is illogical. We would not do this. Like we would not. But he told us book first class. And in going to Tulsa, and the goal is I'm running you out of money, right? And I think this was the first, like, we were scared, but there was a level of trust in the Lord around this. Like, it wasn't like a whole hullabaloo and anxiety and everything. Like, the anxiety did not come in for me until I recognized that, oh, we are running out of money. And remember, I told you guys earlier that my minimum balance before anxiety chipped in was like, and as the minute it hit $600 and below, is like that. And so when the card started to get to that amount, man, that's when it became hard for me. And so I remember at a particular point, the Lord told us to I don't think that's relevant to the story, so I'm not even going to tell you that part, but at some point the Lord sent us to the Grand Canyon, for my birthday. And I was like, God, this is frivolous, 1. 2, I am going to die here because we ain't got no money. At some point we're going to not be able to pay for the rental car. At some point we're not going to be able to put gas in the car. At some point we're going to have to sleep on the road, etc. We're running out of money. I'm going to die here. And I didn't realize that was a lie that was running in my head. It was just, I realized I was battling a level of depression, like a weight on me, like I did not want to get up out of bed, etc. And Lord told me to use a tool that I use in the Pink Flamingo University, which is my community for people who are tired of being the strong one and tired of looking like they have it all together when they're absolutely not fine. And they really want to show up as their real selves in their relationships and not have to have it all together and to be able to trust people, etc. And when I used that tool, that was when I realized I really believe I'm going to die here, which is absolutely not true when you look at it from a scriptural standpoint, because I mean, God has shown us that what he means when he says he's our parent, over and over again, and what he means when he says he's our provider, right? And I mean, if we are going to die, I would have died from 2024 when he started on this journey, right? And so I get to that point where what was really hard too is around that same day, we were in Tulsa, and the Lord said to us, I was saying to my husband, I would really love to have a nice meal somewhere. And the Lord said to my husband, take her to go eat out. And I was just like, God, we don't have the money to go eat out. What are you talking about? And he said, yeah, take her to go eat out. And so we went to Longhorn Steakhouse. And I could not even enjoy the food because I was so worried about us making stupid financial decisions. Like, it's... Imagine that. You're making, like... you're doing this thing not because you believe in it, but because you know if you don't, you're disobeying the Lord. That's where I was. Um, and it was amazing to see. I talked about, checking your feelings in certain situations there. You'll tell you what have a hold over you. But it was so amazing sitting down in that Longhorn Steakhouse with food that tasted good, smelled good, a nice waitress, etc. And the only thing I could focus on is crying about the fact that I was about to hit my 33rd birthday, and this was not the life that I had dreamed I would have, because I had worked so hard before to ensure that I was financially secure. I didn't think I'd be sitting in a restaurant like making fool decisions about money, and like that was where I was at, right? I didn't think I was about to go on a trip that was literally going to kill me and run me out of money and all of that stuff. It was just, that was the thing that kept running in my head, right? And so the day we left for the Grand Canyon was when I realized I really thought I was going to die there. And the Lord was like, nope, you're not going to die. And he made me a couple of promises. It reminded me of a couple of things that he has told me before, etc. And so we went to the Grand Canyon. And I remember a part of what was hard around the Grand Canyon trip. It was beautiful. Like, the journey there was beautiful. My husband was lovely, etc. But I would watch every single gas price. I would be so hung up on trying to find the cheapest hotel that I did not enjoy the journey as much as I could have, right? And there would be points where we pass a cheap gas station and we're thinking that maybe we'll find a cheaper one, and only to realize that, oh, it's very expensive ones beyond that. And I would kick myself and all of that stuff, or maybe I should wait and all of that stuff. Like, the fear of money robbed me of the fullness of that experience, I tell you. But the thing that makes this even harder was, I remember landing on my birthday, and we're like a couple hours away from the Grand Canyon, and we're settling down for the night, and my anxiety is racking up because I'm like, our credit cards are now, one credit card is now fully maxed out, and I'm thinking the money that's left on the other one is to pay for the rental car when we get back, wherever we're dropping off the rental car to. And looking at it, doing the math, and like, oh, we're not gonna have food, we're not gonna have a place to stay, not be able to pay for our place to stay, etc., etc. And feeling so like, oh my God, I'm really gonna die here. And of course, God is telling me, trust me, trust me, trust me. And it's so hard. Like, I'm like, God, I don't trust you. And so one morning when he said it to me again, I'm like, God, I do not trust you. And again came up this thing of, God, where were you when, and this was a difference to where were you now. Because this was a where were you, like, I pull up a couple of things from my childhood. Where were you when I didn't have money for lunch? Like, where were you when this was happening, etc.? And I remember again, he talked to me about choices. He just showed me like that play-by-play of all the times he showed up. And he talked to me about the fact that I had choices. My mother had choices. And how choice is a gift that he has given to man, and he does not violate that. And so he will operate within the bounds of those choices that we have made. And again, it broke me. I tell you, I cried. I cried because I saw the Lord afresh, and it was like, and my thing was, God, you're going to have to teach me how to trust you here. You're going to have to teach me how a father shows up here, because I have no experience with that. Right? And so, I'd gotten some money for my birthday from two of my friends, and we went to the Grand Canyon. we had food at the Grand Canyon covered and all of that stuff. And then I remember coming back from the Grand Canyon that same night. We stopped to get some food before going to a hotel. Like the Lord had told us to drive until we got to a certain point, and then we stopped to get some food. I think it was a McDonald's. And when I came out of the bathroom, Jeremy said to me, Shanielle, the first card is now fully maxed out, it declined. And he had to use a second card to something just bit me. He had to use a second card to pay for our food, and the anxiety came right back up, I tell you. Because guess what? Remember I told you I was planning to use the money on the second card to pay for the car, etc. I started to think maybe we should sleep in the car, etc. And we heard the Lord say quite clearly, book a hotel. Of course, we call the cheapest one that we could find, and one that we had stayed at before. They were booked, told. And so it was kind of like, Lord. And so we stayed at a hotel, and so forth. And I remember we checked into that hotel. We're stepping into a room, and I had a play-by-play moment run through my head. And this time, the play-by-play of scenes that are flashing through my mind were of times when I would deny myself certain gifts because my mom couldn't afford it. I would refuse to even mention certain things to my mom, like a school trip, something I wanted, because I didn't think we could afford it, right? And he showed me how even at Christmas, my mother-in-law had asked us, what do we want for Christmas? And I was willing to ask for what I want, but I looked for the cheapest thing that I could find from the things that I wanted, right? To ask for. And not only that, my husband asked for more expensive things, like something that was more expensive, and I put it in air quote, and I was judging the heck out of him, right? And I remember as these scenes are running through my head, the Lord said to me, stop watching your parents' checkbook. And I realized it was in answer to the question that I had asked him before, like, God, how do I trust you here? And that was the lesson he said to me. It was, be like the kid in a candy store. Ask your father for what you desire, and stop limiting what you desire because you think your parent may or may not be able to afford it. Leave that decision to them. That's none of your business. Leave that decision to me, God, me being God. It's none of your business. And man, I cried, right? Because I'm like, I did not realize I was one of the ways I was always trying to manage the outcomes. That was one of the ways I always felt so tired. That was one of the ways I was just reflecting on the trip and just thinking all the gas that I would watch and all the cheap places that I would try to find food to eat, and I would pick the cheapest thing that I could find, and I was like, that's exhausting to always be running that math in my head. And so it was like, God, I don't want to do that anymore. And he was saying to me that you don't have to do that anymore, right? And so forth. And so I'm going to tell you one more story, and then I'm going to wrap up here, and you'll have to just get the next parts in part 2 whenever I do a part 2. But I remember leaving that hotel the next morning and feeling like I was heading towards my own funeral, because we have been using the money. We have used up some of the money that was meant to pay for the rental car, on a hotel and on food. And it was a level of dread. And as I remember, as I was sitting in the car, and my husband is trying to have conversation with me, and I'm just not like in at all. I realized I had two choices. If God had told me that He is my provider, if I truly believe that God has told me He is our provider and He is our parent, and that I don't have to watch His checkbook, I could either believe Him and indulge in the joy of going back to Tulsa, because that was where we were driving back to go hand in the rental car, or I could say I believe Him but still act like I didn't, which should in this case mean that I don't, and so face the upcoming car drop off with dread and all of that stuff. And I decided that I was going to choose joy. I was going to enjoy the trip back with my husband. We were going to stop and have a lunch when the Lord told us to stop and have a lunch. We were going to delight in just being in the here and now without worrying about the thing that God has told us that He will take care of. And so we get back to Tulsa. It was an amazing day. We get back to Tulsa. And when we get back to Tulsa, we head to the airport to drop off the car. We fill up the car, then head to the airport to drop off the car. And as we hit the airport, there's a level of dread that comes in, like, oh my God, this is it. We're not going to face the music. And the guy scans the car in. We take our stuff out. And I'm a little bit nervous because I'm like, Jeremy, we need to go. My husband is a slow guy. He takes his time with doing stuff. And I'm like, this is not the place for us to be slow doing stuff, right? But we get our stuff out the car, and I keep expecting at any point somebody is gonna say, stop, your car didn't go through, XYZ. But it doesn't happen. In fact, Jeremy gets an email to say that the amount was paid successfully. And then even on top of that, we were able to book an Airbnb, I think for like 3 nights, and pay for a lift to that Airbnb, and I think get some food as well, like pick up some food at a Walmart, I think. I'm actually not sure if I remember that correctly, that piece about the picking up the food. But without the card that should have been maxing out, that the card was able to take that, right? And so I want to end here that when God says He is our provider, He is our provider. The provision may not look the way that we would expect or the way that we would want it to come through, but He does. When God says that He is our parent, He is our parent. And so I really hope and I really encourage, I really hope that if you're watching this video, you will actually start releasing control. Stop letting money be your God. And start releasing control around your finances and start trusting God with that, because I can tell you it's a lot more joyful. That way you'll actually enjoy spending your money more that way and relating with your money more that way, right? Our journey is still ongoing. I have a lot more stories after that moment, because that was just April of 2026, and I did say I'm recording this in July. But through all of those experiences that I've had since 2021, that's how God has been slowly but surely dismantling the areas that I had made money my idol, because money represented a source of security for me. Money was a way that I was able to use to ensure that I could depend on myself when I didn't trust others. Money was a way I could hold things together, right? And I'm just encouraging you, you don't have to hold things together. He holds all things together, right? God's got you. And so, yeah, that's where I stop for now.